On This Week in Enterprise Tech, does your organization have cyber insurance? Well, if it does, hopefully that's enough, because we don't know if those insurance companies are holding their end of the deal. Plus, Brian, Curtis, and I talk with Dirk, Kanngiesser, CEO and founder of CryptoWerks, about how you can start trusting your data again. Blockchain to the rescue. Twice on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twit, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 338, recorded April 19th, 2019. Crypto seal of approval. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Atlassian. Atlassian software powers the full spectrum of collaboration between IT teams and the rest of your organization. Visit Atlassian.com/IT to see what IT can be by giving their products a try for free. And by ThousandEyes. Companies that run in the cloud rely on ThousandEyes. It's the place they go first to see, understand, and improve the digital experience of their cloud-based applications and services. Do the cloud right and improve services for your customers and employees today. Visit ThousandEyes.com/twit. And by LastPass, the #1 most preferred password manager. Just remember your master password, and LastPass remembers the rest. Visit LastPass.com/twit to learn more. Welcome to This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that's dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Lou MARESCA, your guide through this big world of the enterprise, but I definitely can't guide you by myself. I need help from some of the top enterprise tech professionals in the industry, starting with our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin, senior editor at Dark Reading. Curtis, it's great to have you back.
It is great to be here, Lou. Had a little bit of weather roll through this part of Florida a while ago, but I think that circumstances have conspired to let us have a great Twit from the swamp.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. And of course, we have to add to our expert panel, our geek in paradise, Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, it's great to have you back. You've been quite busy lately.
Yeah, lots and lots of installing all kinds of stuff. I'm actually playing with a Legrand DSIM system, which is kind of fun. I'm hoping to be able to go get a better control over how much energy our data centers are using.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Well, folks, we have a lot of energy in this show today. We're gonna get a pretty great show. Not only we're gonna talk about how insurance companies and cyber attacks are dealing with things, but also we have a great guest, Dirk Kanngiesser from CyberWorks, how he's gonna bring your trust back to your data. But before we do, we want to go ahead and jump into this week's blips. Now, it wouldn't be a week without security vulnerabilities. Now, alongside Adobe patches and Microsoft Patch Tuesday, Intel is added as well, with issuing its security warnings and patches for 4 of its different products. The most severe in this group was found in a flaw in the Intel Media SDK, which received a CVSS, or a common vulnerability score, of 7.8. Now, this is led Intel into making the vulnerability, which is called CVE 2018-18094, with high severity. Now, what was the vulnerability, you might be asking? Well, it was actually an exploit that could allow privilege escalation to an authenticated attacker accessing locally. Now, in addition to that SDK vulnerability, this one is actually a little bit less of an issue, but it is attacking the Intel NUC or Next Unit Computing firmware. Now, it too received a higher score, but not as high, 7.5. Now, this vulnerability was interesting because, according to Intel's advisory, an attacker gaining local access to the targeted system may gain multiple advantages by exploiting this flaw, including insufficient input validation in the system's firmware will actually let it to allow authenticated user to enable escalations of privileges, denial of service, and or information disclosure via local access. Now, these are very big flaws, but there's 2 other ones that are not as severe. This one being a medium security one, which is attacking the Intel Graphics Performance Analyzer for Linux. Now, a small upgrade will fix that one. Now, the final one was a low severity, but it's prominent in quote-unquote some Intel microprocessors, which actually may allow an authenticated user to potentially enable information disclosure via via local access. Now, the fix for this one, Incel says, would be to, yep, that's right, follow best practices. Now, okay, Intel, once we figure out what those best practices are, we will follow them. But before that, your best course of action is, of course, making sure you patch and update.
Speaking of best practices, beware of sea turtles in your network traffic. Yes, a sophisticated state-sponsored hacking group is intercepting and redirecting web and email traffic of targeted organizations in over a dozen countries in a pretty brazen DNS hijacking campaign that has heightened fears over vulnerabilities to the Internet's core infrastructure. According to researchers from Cisco Talos, since 2017, the threat group has compromised at least 40 organizations in 13 countries, mostly concentrated across the Middle East and North Africa. In each case, the attackers gained access to and changed the DNS records of the victim organizations, so their internet traffic was routed through attacker-controlled servers. Now, most of the victims of this sea turtle campaign, as Cisco Talos is calling it, are national security related and include ministries of foreign affairs, intelligence agencies, and military organizations. But the Sea Turtle Group has also successfully targeted numerous third-party entities such as internet service providers and telecommunication companies that provide access to the primary target. Now, among this secondary group of victims, recently for the first time has been a DNS registry service. That's an entity that manages the top-level domains like o.coms. Concerns over DNS-level attacks have been growing in recent months. For example, in January, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security issued an emergency directive directing administrators of all .gov and other agency-managed domains to audit their public DNS records to ensure the records hadn't been manipulated. In this case, to make the malicious server appear legitimate, Sea Turtle has been using a technique called certificate impersonation, where the attackers obtain a valid, signed digital certificate from another certificate provider for the existing legitimate domain. Now, threat actors have been previously known to modify DNS records and redirect traffic for a variety of reasons. Now, the concern is whether such attacks are going to increase and the damage that could result from a compromise of a major DNS registry or registrar. Well,
apparently 2/3 of hotel websites are sharing data with third parties. Are we surprised? Anyway, 2/3 of hotel websites inadvertently leak personal data to third-party companies and leave customers vulnerable to hackers. This, according to research firm, cybersecurity firm Symantec, which found that the majority of booking systems used by hotels could allow scammers to access information such as mobile phone and passport numbers. The leaks come from confirmation emails sent to customers, often containing an unsecured direct link to their booking. The report suggests that anyone on the same network could intercept the email and modify or cancel their reservation. Principal threat researcher Chad Wassat tested the websites of 1,500 hotels from 54 countries and found that 2 in 3 of them, or 67%, had that problem. The security lapses are in breach of the EU's GDPR laws, which state that firms must protect the personal data of customers. Dang. So I guess it's time to start changing my hotel reward info to bogus personal data again.
Are you an unsafe driver? Do you speed around or try to get away from someone sometime? Well, some fleet commercial vehicle companies might want to know this information. Fleet Complete is a Toronto-based company that can provide and make a commercial vehicle tracking system that is used for businesses ranging from Sobeys grocery chain to elevator maker ThyssenKrupp to rental agency Thrifty, which used to track and monitor their vehicles. Now, the device plugs into the cars and trucks and communicates with central servers using cellular technology. They allow fleet managers to keep an eye on everything from a vehicle health to the driver performance in real time. Now, in addition to the data streams, Fleet Complete also has developed a new product they call Vision. Now, it's actually a dashboard cam that communicates with the driver's smartphone via localized or local Wi-Fi in the car there. And then it connects to Amazon cloud servers that compute data generated from the camera, which reads street signs and the phone's accelerometer sensors to provide instant audio feedback. Now, you might think with organizations fear of privacy on the rise, this might be dead in the market. Well, that's not true. The fleet tracking market is growing super fast, from an estimated 3.8 billion last year to an expected 12.7 billion this year in health and status for their vehicles. Now, what we're finding is that having insight on the health and status of your vehicles, you actually have quite a return on investment. Not only does it help you figure out service problems before they become big, it also keeps your vehicles healthy. Now, I seem to remember insurance companies trying this with consumers, and it didn't go over well. Who knows? The commercial market might be the niche they needed to be successful in this market. Next time you see a sign on the commercial vehicle that says, "How am I driving?" you might not have to call that number. The company might already know.
Well, here's something interesting. A Princeton University application that's free is now able to provide insight into your home's IoT traffic. A project at Princeton University is studying IoT devices used in homes, and in the process, they've developed a tool that can give individuals a great deal of insight into the IoT activity going on all around them. The Princeton IoT Inspector is an application that uses ARP spoofing to find and monitor network devices in a building. Now, after launching the macOS application, Windows and Linux versions are planned for the near future. The inspector uses a Chrome or Firefox browser window to allow the user to select which devices to monitor and see the results of the monitoring. Inspector takes an inventory of IoT devices, allowing users to see whether there are any hidden IoT devices on their networks and in their buildings. Monitoring the traffic patterns and destination points for data from those devices will allow users to see where the information is going, and in addition, it shows whether the data from a given device is encrypted and whether that encryption is based on newer, more secure techniques. In return for the information, data is uploaded to the Princeton research team. Now, the team has done things right so far. They've released the source code on GitHub and allow a user to download or delete their data at any time. To get this, just head on over to https://iot-inspector.princeton.edu.
So apparently, clouds are heating up in the defense world. So while the DoD already has a few classified clouds, what they don't have is a larger cloud that meets FISMA standards for government-only virtualized systems. Up to now, only AWS has been certified for secret and top-secret processing, but in theory, this contract could change that. There's been a bit of a brouhaha about a former Amazon AWS employee being involved in the process, but he has actually recused himself from the decision-making process. But even still, folks like Oracle are still crying foul. This contract can be worth as much as $10 billion over the next 10 years and could spell a major downturn in government data centers that are woefully underpowered, undersecured, and understaffed.
Big news coming from Facebook this week, and an updated blog post they originally posted on March 21st. Facebook revealed it had mistakenly stored the passwords of hundreds of millions of users unencrypted to include a new sentence admitting that millions of more Instagram accounts were also affected. Now, originally it was called out that hundreds of millions of Facebook Lite users, tens of millions of other Facebook users, and tens of thousands of Instagram users were affected. Now, in light of the new info, Facebook has discovered additional logs of Instagram passwords being stored in a readable format. They are now estimating that the issue had impacted millions of Instagram users as well. Now, the interesting part of this news is that, number one, this was actually posted and it was updated against a March 21st blog post. It was not a new blog post. They did it silently, and they did it on a day with tons of other news around scandals and privacy callouts. Now, I guess they didn't want any more attention in this area than they already had before, but Facebook has reported that they have no evidence that there's any misuse of the username and passwords they found. I don't know about you, but do you trust an organization that buries data leaks to try to divert attention away from them? Think about it. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. But next up, we have a really great set of bites. But before we get to those, we have to thank our great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is Atlassian. Now, whether you're an engineer, an IT team, or someone who wants to manage a large team and their work items, you probably have used Atlassian products or two. Now, I remember back in 2002, Atlassian had just started and they launched a perfectly timed product that really met the emerging agile market. Now, originally, it was just conceived as a bug tracking tool, but the Jira ticket quickly became the digital record of choice for tracking units of highly collaborative and agile environments. Now, fast forward 16 years, DevOps is really on everyone's docket, and Atlassian is still leading the pack in areas that helps IT teams rise to the occasion. For me, I've been using Bitbucket for years, managed a lot of my projects and document source code, plus tickets for that. Those projects go through Jira, and I get alerted on my Microsoft Teams channel. Now, Atlassian really is the collaboration software company that empowers IT teams around the world. Like all organizations, you want to ship products faster, more efficiently, and of course, you want to make them higher quality. And in order to stay competitive in this cloud-based world, IT teams are really required to plan and execute faster than ever. And because today's applications are more complex than ever, incidents often require open, agile, and smart coordination between operations and software development teams. Plus, you want to ensure your customers' feedback is really added to that value prop. Now, sometimes businesses fall short because they're disjointed workflows. Well, this is where Atlassian's wheelhouse is. They give you and your organization the power to manage that complex set of collaborations. They provide technology backbone to really help the modern IT organization plan, service, and support the kind of change that propels your business. Now, their tools are not just for developers, but they offer a ton of things there. Not only do they offer affordable, reliable suites for teams of all sizes, but they also offer things for DevOps to Agile, IT apps to Ops, ITSM, and whatever you need next. Now, Atlassian provides that technology backbone that you need. With Jira Software, Confluence, Bitbucket, Atlassian forms the backbone of an effective cross-team project planning and organization and communication. Now, with Jira Ops Genie and Status Page, they help teams to better detect incidents faster, resolve issues faster, as well as keep customers and stakeholders up to date. Your teams can choose tools that are right for them and their current framework and trust that they can grow with you. Like all Atlassian products, the tools for your IT team are easy and free to try. Just go ahead to Atlassian.com/IT to find out which Atlassian offering is right for your team. Try Atlassian today and see what IT can be. That's Atlassian.com/IT. And we thank Atlassian for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's that time of the show. We can jump into the bites. We have some really great news stories for this week to have a little bit of a discussion on. And now, as you hear each and every week on the show, we talk about data breaches, cyber attacks, privacy issues. Now, organizations know that they are going to hit these things quite often, and it's inevitable, right? Now, to prepare for that and to produce, they basically produce expensive data migration plans, securing data. They want to make sure they're alerting the issues and ensure that they really have the right systems in place. But what they also do is they want to make sure that they're covered, just in case there isn't a breach or attack. Well, this story that we're talking about today calls out a well-known food brand called Mondelez Company, which is actually the owner of a dozen food companies like Cadbury Chocolate and Philadelphia Cream Cheese. Now, this company was struck by the NotPetya cyber strike in 2017. And their business was put to halt, causing them to lose more than $100 million. Now, what made them feel better about the whole ordeal? Well, they were insured, right? That much should make them feel better. That's right, good old liability insurance. But when they tried to exercise it, they were blocked by the insurance company, who used a loophole in their clause, saying that they are exercising their war exclusion protocol or clause, which protects the insurer from being put up with costs related to the damage from war. Now, that's right. They were collateral damage in war. In this case, cyber war. Now, was the insurance company in the right? Now, NotPetya did cause more than $700 million damage worldwide that we know about. Now, how do they classify this as an act of war? Well, according to them, in a statement in 2018, the White House actually described NotPetya as part of the Kremlin's ongoing effort to destabilize Ukraine, and it said it had demonstrated ever more clearly Russia's involvement in the ongoing conflict. So that's kind of how they got around it, and they're bringing it to court. Now there's a suit on it. Now I want to throw this. I want to actually throw it to you guys. I want to start with you, Curt. What do you guys think? Was this really an act of war? Can they really classify it like this? Is it really a way for them to get out of this type of insurance?
Well, can they classify it like this? They can certainly try. As in so many of these things, I suspect that the next step will be the ceremonial throwing of lawyers at one another. But I think that what we have is one of those cases where we find out that words matter. As has been pointed out, previous administrations went to great pains not to describe cyber attacks as being any part of a cyber war. And they went to great pains to paint it in non-military and non-warlike terms. That has not been the case in the last couple of years. And as we've seen the rhetoric ratchet up, insurance companies and others are looking at that rhetoric and seeing what legal impact it could have. So I think this is one of those cases where the urge to justify actions on a political basis are going to have some significant economic ramifications for companies who feel like they should be protected from these things.
Chee, but I want to throw this to you. What do you think? I mean, do you think that this is something that insurance companies should be able to do? Hey, if you're paying for cyber coverage in this case, a lot of them are really kind of narrowly written to kind of relate to customer data loss, and some of them just provide like credit check or cover legal bills, but they don't really kind of recover costs. Should they be able to get out of it by saying, hey, this was war, this is war? I mean, they can basically classify that anyways.
Well, I don't have a problem with the War Exclusion Act. It's piece itself. Insurance insurance coverage is not a mutual destruction pact. So if we go back to the Blitz in London, insurance companies, Lloyd's of London actually, was unable to fulfill their fiduciary duties to provide rebuilding money for every case during the Blitz because they had an official act of war. Great Britain was at war with the Axis powers. The problem I have with this is there has been no official act of war. I definitely agree with the previous administration on staying away from using war terms. I'm not real happy with this current administration on pulling the trigger on that and actually using it. Here's a comment from Jake Alcott, the vice president of BitSite Technologies. We still don't have a clear idea of what cyber warfare actually looks like. That is one of the struggles in this case. No one has said that this was an all-out cyber war by Russia or China or North Korea or whatever. This is not, the world is changing, and the insurance company, in this case, I'm going to actually name and shame, Zurich Insurance, looked for a loophole, and they decided, no, we're not going to go bankrupt, because if we cover this company for that $100 million, what's to prevent others? Right. I don't think it was right. I don't blame them for not falling on a grenade, so to speak. But I think there's going to need to be some middle ground. Cyber insurance needs to be payable, but cyber insurance isn't a mutual destruction pact.
Right. I think that brings me to the next question. I'll throw this to Curtis. Curtis, what do you think? There's a lot of cyber. If I go search online right now, I can find a bunch of companies that are offering cyber insurance. Does this kind of deem them useless in the future? I mean, obviously, they all have probably similar clauses. Should companies really be leaning on this at all for just protection?
Well, I think that companies must have cyber insurance. I think that in today's atmosphere, if they had any kind of incident, did not have the cyber insurance, they would face massive shareholder revolt and shareholder lawsuits. But I think that what we need to do, and I think what this will begin, is a series of negotiations about what precisely cyber warfare looks like. As Brian says, we don't know right now. We have some ideas. Does the mere participation of a group associated with a nation state mean that it is warfare? That's where we sort of boil things down. And we don't know yet. Courts are going to weigh in, international courts. International insurance law is a dramatic and complex thing. So this is not going to be solved anytime soon. What I do think we're going to need to do is watch the way words are used, because this is one of those great illustrations. Like I said, words matter, and the use of one word over another has consequences in the real world, some of which can cost real money.
That's right. Words do matter. Words do matter. Well, Curt, I want to do that, close that bite up and throw it over to you for your bite about VPN vulnerabilities.
Yeah, this was really interesting because we did have a series of vulnerabilities to VPN implementations. I want to be careful about this. That led to some real vulnerabilities in security. Now, encryption everywhere has become one of the rallying cries of the enterprise security in the waning days of this millennium. But when one of the foundation technologies of that encryption, VPN, is broken, the repercussions can be enormous. So the Department of Homeland Security sent out a notice of vulnerabilities in 4 VPN applications. And these notices have caused some real anxiety. As it turns out, the issue isn't in the basic encryption engines at work in the VPNs. It's in the way the information of whether a particular session has already been authenticated is stored and protected that is in real question. Now, what does it mean when a VPN is insecurely implemented? In this case, it boils down to some SSL VPNs that were kind of carelessly implemented in how they stored the cookies that indicated whether or not a particular session has been encrypted. Standard VPNs using a VPN client tend to use certificates or keys. Web-based use cookies. And as it turns out, there are 4 of these where someone could grab a cookie that indicates that a session has been encrypted over the VPN, use that cookie for a new unauthenticated session, and be on the enterprise network just as though they were legitimately authenticated. Now, this has led to a lot of conversation. I did the article that I'm basing this bite on, and I talked to a number of people, and depending upon exactly which axe they were grinding, they either said everything is cool, you just have to be careful about how you implement your VPN, or they said, well, this marks the beginning of the end of the era of the VPN. What we really need to go to is the software-defined perimeter, which is basically where an endpoint, call it a browser or a device, authenticates directly to an application back on the server side. There's none of this tunneling network to network. So I want to talk to my co-host, and Brian, I'm going to turn to you because I know this is one of those areas that's kind of near and dear to your heart. What do you think? Is this a real weakness in VPNs, or have we just stumbled across a fringe condition that doesn't really signify much other than you should be careful with your cookies?
Actually, what I'm going to do before I answer that is I'm going to rub a little salt in the wound. This particular cookie issue isn't just SSL VPNs. Keep in mind, a lot of people, a lot of organizations, a lot of manufacturers actually implement single sign-on using very, very, very similar technology. And there has been several vulnerabilities in the past couple of years where SSO cookies have been improperly stored and have introduced some fairly significant vulnerabilities. So that's the salt in the wound. Now, is the sky falling? No. Cookies can be stored correctly. Cookies can be re-rolled, recreated quickly. Personally, I think those organizations that make their cookies valid for days on end are, fooling themselves. I think cookies need to have fairly short lifespans. Keep in mind, the big reason why a lot of this was done was so that the applications don't have to keep recreating encrypted tunnels on every single application. It was so that you had a better user experience. Now, this is actually going to provide a little bit of segue into our guest, because one of the things that our guest is going to be talking about is what I'm probably going to call the next generation. And the next generation is where we start implementing blockchain. So instead of having to rely only on cookies, now we're going to have what I like to think of as almost a middle ground, where we're not quite re-rolling the encryption connection to every single application, which could slow things down a lot, but rather rely on a blockchain so that we have a better way of trusting. Or I guess our guests, their motto seems to be creating a trustless environment. So I guess that's shifting the trust to blockchain so that as you move around within an application, because keep in mind, say an e-shopping application isn't just one application. It's a series. It's a constellation. And single sign-on has made that type of thing possible. So I think we're going to have to get more sophisticated. I think blockchain might be an answer. I'm sure our guest is chomping at the bit to dive in on this. But I think we also need to get more realistic about cookies and how we implement things like single sign-on. So how's that for my 2 cents?
I think we got at least 3 or 4 cents out of that one, and good sense they were. Lou, I know we're pressed for time, but I wanted to quickly turn to you because you deal with applications and their design and development on a daily basis. What do you think about this idea of the software-defined perimeter, where you basically have the endpoint, whether it be a laptop or a tablet or even a phone, that's authenticating back to the application rather than authenticating to the network on which the application lives? Do you see any either promise or problems with that kind of approach?
Well, from an identity perspective, it's actually a better approach because you get a better understanding of the user. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example is if you're in a manufacturing center and you're on some random terminal throughout the warehouse, and you want somebody to be able to log in, but you want to be able to audit that login and know exactly the user, where they're from, what terminal they're at, and that kind of thing. You kind of have to actually authenticate back to the user and the user's machine to really understand its origin. And I think that's kind of what these types of authentications are doing. Now, Cheebert's right. The combination of security tokens and where you're storing them, local storage in the browser, or whether you're storing them in cookies or doing them both, a lot of them are vulnerable to cross-site scripting and a lot of other things. And so you find there's always going to be a way, unless these things are working together, unless you're saying, hey, the type of authentication that I'm using will also work really well over a VPN, and it'll work with the network layer, then you could run into these types of problems. So organizations have to be really careful about that, and how they kind of merge these two things together.
Well, I think that figuring out who we can trust, how we establish that trust, may be the major issue of networking and computing going forward. And I'm glad that we have a guest coming up who's going to talk about that. Well, that does it for my bite, and I think for the bites. So, Lou, I'm going to turn it back to you to move us a little further along the Twiat trail.
Sounds good. Thanks, Curt. Well, next up, we have a great guest to drop some knowledge on Twiat, right? Brian gave a little teaser there. So before we get to that guest, we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is ThousandEyes. Now, first, you ever been and watched those sci-fi films where they walk into this war room, and on the wall there's like different screens showing the network and all the different things that are going on? Well, wouldn't it be cool if you could do that in reality? Well, imagine if you had ThousandEyes. You already know the internet is the backbone of organizations and enterprise. It's really a complex network of nodes and data. And when your business depends on it, you need to have deep insights into the health and performance of it at all times. Well, that's where ThousandEyes is going to make it easier for you and your organization. There are a ton of cloud apps like PaaS and SaaS services like Office 365, WebEx, Salesforce, and more. And you have to have a view or the lay of the land of the network and the internet at all times to know what your users are seeing, how your organization is running. You need to know how it's really affecting the user interface, user experience. Well, it's in the company's name. They give you more than 1,000 eyes to surface the data you need to provide the best-in-class view of your network. Now, you might say, well, if they're going to provide that much insight, it must be hard to set up and deploy. Well, ThousandEyes has found a way to make it easy to deploy and start collecting data in no time. Now, they have a concept of what they call network agents. Now, you deploy these agents throughout your network. You're actually instantly able to visualize and monitor and diagnose your data. Whether you deploy on an appliance, a virtual appliance, or Hyper-V appliance, or others, they really make it easy to start getting valuable information about the network that's affecting your business. Now, these agents are sensors that are deployed globally, and they give pulses of information back what's going on in your network. Now, imagine if you have a user and a customer complaining about their access to a service over in Japan. Well, your cloud agent in Japan can give you the data you need to diagnose the network and what's causing the issue. Now, global sets of customers are really not a problem for ThousandEyes. They give you that vantage point you need to solve issues and diagnose issues on your network. Now, they also have the concept of enterprise agents as well, which are actually these agents that you deploy in a branch office or a data center, and they give you that hybrid view of the end-to-end of the entire network. Now, having used ThousandEyes and the power of it, it makes you kind of feel like you're in the driver's seat of your network and the services. They make you feel like you're in the know and you know what's going on at all times. Now, they also put themselves in the point of view of their customers and end users, but they also their end users agents as well to show you exactly what their users are seeing at any point in time. Now, data is not really useful unless you can visualize it and you can collect it and you can create patterns on it. And that's where ThousandEyes has really kind of stepped forward and done a great job. They process, they correlate your data, they generate pattern information. It truly is network intelligence. Now, ThousandEyes puts itself in the brains and the eyes of a network engineer or IT professional. You can probably envision your network to look a certain way, like, for instance, interconnected nodes. Now, you can't troubleshoot a network by just looking at pie charts, area charts, and bar charts. You need it spatially. You need to look at it spatially. You need to visualize the network. Well, ThousandEyes provides a really beautiful and real-world set of visualizations. They really kind of encapsulate that complexity of your network. They give you that data, and you can actually run with it proactively. Now, not only that, they have a unique path visualization technology that extends really way beyond the boundaries, allowing you to see and really understand and improve your experience and what's going on with all your apps, your services, and your websites. No more Wireshark figuring out your issues. Your network's more than just an MPLS backbone network. You need more than package captures and net flows. ThousandEyes helps you solve real-world issues with unique, actionable data and great visualizations. Regain control of your network and ensure the best possible experience for your customers and employees. Get an immediate, unmatched view of all the networks and dependencies that impact your users' digital experience. Visit ThousandEyes.com/twit to see what you've been missing. You'll get the exclusive ebook on the 5 cloud migration challenges you shouldn't ignore. If the cloud is important to you, either today or in the future, visit ThousandEyes.com/twit. That's ThousandEyes.com/twit. ThousandEyes, thrive in a connected world. And we thank ThousandEyes for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's my favorite part of the show. We get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the Twiat riot. And today we have Dirk Kanngiesser CEO and founder of CryptoWerks. Dirk, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be with you guys.
Well, we know we have a lot of things to talk about. As Brian has kind of pointed out, there's a ton of things to talk about, especially with trusting your data. But before we get to that, our audience really loves to hear about the journey people kind of go through in the industry, and they love to hear about origin stories. Can you maybe just take us through a quick journey and how you finally ended up at CryptoWerks?
Well, yes. I mean, it really boils down to my techie co-founder, who is professor for blockchain here just across the Bay Area in Berkeley, actually. And with him, I founded a company before in the mobile application management space, which we ultimately sold to Good and BlackBerry. And he actually, about 2.5 years ago, came to me and said, hey, I had a bright moment when I paddled my kayak to IBM here, and look at it. And frankly speaking, this is how always these ideas sometimes come. You have, it's not critical thinking for people sweaty in a room. It's sometimes this genius idea, and then you try to implement it. And that's what we have done in the last 2 years, to basically code something around the topic of blockchain, which you already mentioned. And because we believe blockchain indeed has inherent strong value, but there are some conflicting forces with blockchains, and we want to overcome them. So that's the story. And it's actually also a little bit of surprise that 2 Germans now in the Bay Area since 10 years here came up with that. And the rest of the team are non-Germans. So we made a kind of a rule not to have too many of them. But here are the guys who originally came from beer country, Germany, and migrated to the US about 10 years ago.
Fantastic. Now, let's take a step back for a second, because today organizations, they have a ton of data, whether it's documents or files, videos, images, whatever. What are organizations doing today to help them trust their data that you kind of thought, hey, we got to make this better?
I mean, of course you have already mechanisms like, hey, I hash the data and I store them on a specific server where only me or controlled parties have access to. That's a possibility. However, and that is what I call, you actually use trusted parties, or you use worm memory, right? Once read many optical storage, tough old stuff, 80s technology to handle this, right? We believe there are better ways, less expensive ways, and do it on massive scale. So our belief is actually, if you think back, encryption 20 years ago, right? We saw it in, well, probably banking, internet banking originally. And now it's ubiquitous. Why? Because the cost of encryption is almost zero for each encrypted item. We believe that data integrity can be also provided absolutely at massive scale. And we believe that the blockchains are actually, if used right, a really great way to do so.
Makes sense. I think one thing I want to get your thoughts on is, I know a lot of organizations, they use different file formats. Like I know there's the OPC format, which is the Open Package Convention format, which you can essentially digitally sign. I think you kind of talked about that. Hey, let's store some of that data on just disk and then verify it. Some of the OSs out there, they have crypto service providers that allow you to encrypt data, as well as there's different file formats like zip format. And they allow you to essentially use a PGP or X509 to encrypt your data. But what about, also I want to know is, what about services like, for instance, there's companies like Adobe, they're offering Adobe Sign, which is essentially kind of a service, a cloud service that offers like certificate-based digital identification and making sure that your data is intact and you can trust it.
Absolutely. It's the old way, or let's mention Adobe, mention DocuSign, mention what they all have in common is that you indeed need to trust Adobe. You need to trust DocuSign. You need to trust IBM. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but the question is, do we really want to, is the world better off if we try to find ways to have independent verification of trust, independently from one specific vendor? And that is a little bit the thing where we are trying to put a mark into the landscape here.
Got it. So let's kind of dig into that, because I'm super interested about this technology. One thing, as soon as I heard it, before I went and did a little research, is I thought, oh man, I'm putting my corporate data, my organization's data on a blockchain. I'm still worried about vulnerabilities in blockchain. Is that really what you're doing, or are you doing something different?
No. Absolutely. A very, very good question indeed, because it's a belief system question. There are a lot of people who actually advocate to put data on the blockchain and exchange data among the blockchains. We basically think, please leave your data where they belong. Leave them behind the firewall, leave them in your trusted AWS server structure, whatever you have, leave them there. What we actually believe is, why don't you just store hashes of the data and use standard SHA 256 or whatever you like to prefer, and hash the data and store them on the blockchain? So that's the principal first concept, which might be different, right? But in order to do that, usually what you would do right now is you can use, and I assume that the principal concepts for your listener and for you especially, of course you are, is the difference between private blockchain, basically IBM Hyperledger based, most of them, and public blockchains. These two concepts are two separate blockchain concepts, and the public blockchain concept, of course, Bitcoin blockchain and Ethereum have become very well known through cryptocurrencies. But they do actually provide something very interestingly. They provide the highest independent number of nodes. I think Bitcoin and Ethereum each have about 8,000 nodes in it. So if you want to use the public blockchains because you believe that the number of nodes is actually correlated to the immutability of the data, then you would love to write into the public blockchains. Two handicaps you have to overcome. One is, well, they are very slow, 5 to 7 transactions worldwide per second, not really database speed, right? Second, they are costly. I don't know the latest, maybe 30 cents, 50 cents per transaction. So if you want to dump a whole database, hash it, and store the hashes in the blockchain, you don't assume they have, for the sake of it, 1 million hashes. You don't want to pay 1 million times 50 cents, and you don't want to wait 1 million divided by 5 seconds, right, in order to have your database then hashed and then anchored in the blockchain. Both of these things we overcome. CryptoWerks is a middleware on top of all the blockchains. Currently, we have API to 24 of them. And basically, the customers can select and choose which blockchain they want to store the data. Currently, we offer that as a business model on number of transactions you do. And we actually don't ask for 50 cents for a transaction, but we probably charge the customers, depending on volume, a fraction of a cent. And that actually we can also do for the speed of your database. Currently, we claim, and we have proven that with installations, that we can handle 1 million transactions on the Bitcoin blockchain and or the Ethereum blockchains. So this is basically a bit out. I can tell you, if you like, in layman terms, also how the technology really works, because a lot of people might scratch their head and say, that's too good to be true, right? But right. I leave it at that at the moment.
Yeah, I think it would be great to kind of go in that a little bit, because one thing that I'm wondering about is you're saying, hey, if you can store your data anywhere, as long as you go through our middleware, we'll be able to hash it and verify it, no matter if you retrieve it from a database or whatnot. We'll be able to verify that the data is still intact, it's still the original data, and you can trust it. And so I guess that would be my question is so basically organizations, they have to go and get this implemented. They have to go through the workflow of getting the middleware up and running. And then do they have to integrate it with all their systems? Do you already have integration packages like for MySQL and all these other ones, or like SharePoint, that kind of thing for actually documents and so on?
Yes. So basically our most famous way to interact with us is through a REST API. And there are actually two calls: send the hashes, so write, and the other one is verification of it. Very simply to integrate into existing processes. We that's another belief system we have, is we don't think the organization should actually recreate or change, because now we have blockchains, their current processes. We actually come from the side and install the trust element to it by basically that asking them that they send us hashes of the data. We never want to see the original data. They send us the hashes, and we make sure that these hashes are anchored into one or multiple blockchains. So how does that really work? And in a very simple way, it is actually where the IP and where some of the tricks and some of the patents lie, is actually that you give us 1 million hashes, for example, we make a red ribbon around it, meaning we super hash, we hash the hashes, the 1 million, right? And then only the hash of the hashes goes into the blockchain. In a number of bytes, that means 1 million hashes, each of them, if you take SH8 256, 32 bytes, 1 million 32 bytes is 32 megabytes. We reduce this again for the load factor, let me say it, to again one single hash, and only one single hash goes into the blockchain. So that is neat, but not IP really worthy. What is IP worthy? That for each of the individual hashes you gave me, I return to you something what we call a CryptoWerks seal, which is a mathematical construct with whom you, together with the hash of the data, can at any given point in time, let's say in the regulator or whoever, or at the moment when you want to prove that your data are authentic, you can make sure that you take your original data, make a hash of it, take the seal with it, and you can create a mathematical proof that you are anchored in the Bitcoin or in the Ethereum or in IBM Hyperledger or in IOTA or in Hashgraph, you name it. We have APIs to all of them. On the application layer side, we are connected to SAP HANA and of course to other very large database providers, but we are a cloud service. So we can take a whole database and do that. So in that sense, it's a very inexpensive, highly scalable way to make sure that your data have not been tampered with.
Fantastic. Well, folks, when we come back, I do want to bring my co-host back in because they have triggered a bunch of questions to some really interesting technology, so they want to ask you about that. But before I do that, I do want to bring in another sponsor and thank them for this week in Enterprise Tech, and that is, of course, one of our favorite tools, which is LastPass. Now, you probably have your favorite tool out there. Mine definitely is LastPass. If you haven't gotten it already, go and get it. This is one of my favorite tools. I use it each and every day. I use it to log into this account that I'm logged into right now. I'm going to guess that if you have a password, a username and password for every site out there, you probably don't remember them all, right? I mean, there's a username and password for every site you go to, whether it's a bank, a financial site, a social network, a business site, your email. And you don't want to have to remember them all, right? I mean, plus if you do try to remember them all, you usually make them something that you know, and that makes them more vulnerable. Well, that's where LastPass jumps in. It makes it so that you can store your passwords in a secure manner and only have one master password to access them. And that allows you to generate random passwords and not have to really even know the passwords to some of these services. Now, I'll tell you one thing. I know people who actually leave passwords on their desk on a sticky note. And I know people who have put passwords in email or sent it to their spouses in email. Not really a secure thing to do, but that's where LastPass jumps in and helps us all. It automatically remembers, fills your passwords anytime, anywhere on your computer or your mobile device. All you have to do is remember that master password. Now, I remember I was sitting here at work and my wife called and said, "Hey, I have to pay this bill. It's going to be late. I don't know the password." All I had to do is go over, log in with my master password. Bam, I was able to give her the password. She was able to log in, pay the bill, and we were all safe and ready to go. Really saved me time and money. Plus, it works with any one of your devices. Really, it works. Not only supports browsers like Chrome and Edge and Firefox, Opera more, but also your Android and iOS device. What it really kind of adds peace of mind because your data is encrypted and decrypted at the device level. And this means that data is stored in the vault, kept secret, even from LastPass. Now, I've been talking about my personal use, but LastPass is really great for not only LastPass for families, but also enterprise as well. Enterprises are always battling people trying to breach their networks. Now, this piece of data is interesting because 81% of breaches are caused by weak or reused passwords. Plus, the survey also shows that 32% of employees share passwords. Well, LastPass makes it easy to use unique, random passwords that your employees don't have to remember, write down. It's a secure vault to share passwords, manage access, and make it easier for your organization. Now, in large organizations, people have to share those passwords. They don't want to be passing sticky notes around, right? So that's where LastPass jumps in. Makes it so it's easy for your organization to share it. Plus, it allows you to have complete customization around access to it. You can set master password requirements, restrict access to specific devices and locations. You can enable resets and more. They also offer multi-factor auth. Now, with the LastPass Authenticator, it blocks attackers and it ensures that you identify people who are accessing it. Plus, get this, this will actually raise some eyebrows in the IT industry. They also supports Active Directory integration. That means that you really only have to remember one password, their AD password, and you get access to all your other passwords that you need. For me, that's kind of a amazing deal to do. I have to remember I log into my AD network here, bam, I have access to the rest of my passwords. Really kind of great feature there. Also with LastPass Enterprise, you can configure over 100 policies, access security reports, create share folders. You can access a ton of stuff, not just passwords, including database logins, SSH keys, software licenses, and a ton of other things. I can go on and on about LastPass. It's such a great tool. It works great for personal use, for family use, for enterprise use. Protect yourself and your business with LastPass, the #1 most preferred password manager, trusted by over 43,000 businesses. Join over 13.5 million people who have signed up for LastPass and are loving and trusting it. Visit LastPass.com/twit to find out how they can help. That's LastPass.com/twit. And we thank LastPass for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we're talking with Dirk, CEO and founder of CryptoWerks. Dirk, I want to throw it over to my co-host, Curtis. He actually has some questions to you about definitions. Curtis?
Certainly. Dirk, I've been enjoying hearing your responses to Lou, but I've got a question that I'd really like to get you to answer. On your website, you don't really talk about data security. You talk about data integrity. So Can you tell us what it is that you're doing that is offering either more or less than people think about when they think about data security in this context?
Yeah, a very good question. Indeed. I mean, we believe that data integrity is somewhat a sub-segment of data security overall. What I mean by data and integrity actually is that these days we cannot be 100% sure anymore that hackers have not moved in and actually changed the data, right? And we want to be sure that, especially if they think about complex supply chains among untrusted parties, that when decision makings are based on data, that people have an easy way at scale to make sure that the data they base the decision on are actually identical in its holistic in everything when the decision is made. And the way to do that is comparing it to the source, to the original source of the data. And that's what we can provide. Think about an archiving. We have some customers where actually think about supply chain from A to Z, right? And the data which are originated at point A and arrives at point Z, right? We have multiple ways of finding, we encrypting the data, but how can we be 100% sure that the data indeed, which are used by point Z, are exactly identical to point A. The way you could do that easily is if you rehash the data at point Z and make sure that these hashes you have created have been actually stored by point A in the blockchains. So that is technically possible. What we want to do for the world, however, is to do that inexpensively, use multiple blockchains, including the public blockchains, because if you use the private blockchains or a specific vendor even with a private blockchain, then we are again in the dilemma that we need to trust the vendor. So that is the way we think about data integrity.
Okay, I like the way that sounds, and I can see what you're doing. But let me ask you, for example, for a use case, would this would your integrity system work for something like, say, the food delivery chain, supply chain, where they track documentation from point of origin to point of consumer purchase and want to make sure that there has been no change? Is that the level of verification and integrity that you're offering?
Yes. Yes, indeed. I take it one step further. We are actually working right now on a specific project in the cold chain area, because the regulator later, if you transport, let's say, chicken or perishable goods, which have to be maintained in a very specific temperature range over the whole supply chain, that gets more and more complex. If you would put all the data, all the temperature sensor data, and now I'm talking about IoT basically, IoT applications. If you take all this data generated, hash them, and store them in the blockchain, you have an immutable, independent proof record of that specific sensor status. I make it as a very, it's not a cocky meant example, but living here in the Bay Area, of course, we all remember the Tesla who ran in Florida against that. And the discussion, of course, was, well, actually, was the autopilot on? Was the autopilot off? Think about that if somebody who generates sensor data, which are critical later on in court, of course, a company like, in this case, Tesla, when it goes to court, has a very hard time to prove to the judge that it was not in their best interest to say, well, the autopilot was off, it was the fault of the driver. Well, how would you prove that? How would you actually make sure that you can prove to a regulator, to a judge, to an independent party that the status of a specific sensor was at a specific stage? That is also something how you can take data integrity to the next level. I make this even more transparent and important. If we more and more will move into machine-to-machine transactions, used based on AI, deep learning, constantly changing algorithms, how will we prove if we let the world make the machines make important decisions? I bet the regulator, and it should come in and say, well, prove to me that which algorithm you have ran on December 18th at 3:45 in the afternoon. That is something you could also very well establish through this mechanism of massively storing all the events in the blockchain, anticipating that you can do that vendor independent, anticipating that you can do that at very low unit cost.
So, Dirk, I'd like to go and continue this session of looking into your crystal ball. This is starting to sound like one of the problems I worked on for several three-letter agencies was dealing with digital identification. You know, the data that's stored on a smart card that goes with people from installation to installation. Could I use something like this so that I can, one, verify that those are valid ID cards? And conversely, can I also use this system to revoke stolen identities?
Very good question. For the first one, I can give you an easy answer, yes. For the revoking, that's getting a little bit more complicated and probably beyond. We have some ideas there, but it's not our current core technology, right? But let me just be very transparent on your first use case. Indeed, if you have a complex delivery of data through a chain, it could be a supply chain, it could be NATO partners, it could be landmines. We have actually a use case which we gave for free where we actually document the mines of landmines, which is unfortunately still a terrible thing. Well, if there is then peace suddenly, well, the parties are not really interested to share the actual data of the landmines. What if there is a convention, if landmine geodata can be hashed and should be stored into the blockchain at scale, and by that problem would be overcome. Anyway, so yeah, to the point, it can be done very easily that you hash all of the sensor data, all of the algorithm data, and when they arrive through a complex distribution system, these original data, however you distribute them, and the party they ultimately ended up with them wants to make sure that what they have received are absolute identical original data, then they would simply rehash it. The originator of the party would have sent them these little mathematical codes, which is associated in the database. So what we recommend is you have a database, you send us the hashes, we give you for each of the data, we give you this CryptoWerks seal, you store the seal as one column in your database, and when you then exchange that data with the database, you attach the seal. So everyone who receives the seal can then make sure that the data which he or she has also received are indeed 100% identical by using a simple mathematical construct. It's a 2-page open source code, which you can do independent with us, the verification, that your individual data is indeed as a hash anchored in the blockchain. So that can be done massively at scale. By the way, there is one other interesting benefit of that, which is very often linked to the European friends, which is GDPR compliance. Blockchain and GDPR does not go very well together, especially if you want to store data on the blockchain. Well, how do you delete it? The right to be forgotten is a fundamental aspect of the GDPR law. With us, by only storing hashes and a convoluted super hash, or actually only in the blockchain, you have a way to overcome that GDPR requirement, so the right to be forgotten. And second, if you delete the CryptoWerks seal, which is associated with every original data, you actually have a killer switch, because by that you kill the link to the underlying blockchain.
Fantastic. Dirk Kanngiesser, CEO and founder of CryptoWerks. Thank you so much for being here, Dirk. Unfortunately, we're running a low of time, but before we close up, we want to give you a chance to tell the folks at home where they can learn about CryptoWerks, where they can try it out, where they can get started. Go ahead and let them know.
Yes, I mean, thank you. Visit our webpage. And actually, for the folks who actually want to try it out, I think our API can be downloaded for free and tested on the Bitcoin and Ethereum test chains. So people can easily get our codes through our developer part of our webpage and can play around with it. And they can see how easy it is to integrate in in any kind of corporate or other applications.
Fantastic. Well, folks, you've done it again. You sat through another hour of the Best Dang Enterprise podcast, according to 9 out of 10 signed hash fragments. But I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially my co-host in crime, starting with our very own Mr. Geeking Paradise, Mr. Brian Chee, our fabulous producer as well. Chee, where can the folks find you and all of your work?
Well, as always, I am on Twitter at ADVNETLAB, Advanced Net Lab. Or you're more than welcome to throw me some email. I'm Cheebird at twit.tv. Or I tell you what, why don't you send that email to Twyat at twit.tv, and that'll hit all the hosts. Love to hear from you. We've got all kinds of things happening. And just as a kind of a teaser, we're going to do a VoIP troubleshooting after school special. So a lot of people said, no, Twyat's long enough, so we're not going to add it to Twyat. We're going to make it an after school special. And we're going to hack it up into smaller pieces, little bite-sized pieces, and we're going to be running it after Twyat airs. That way you're getting your wish, you're getting more content, deeper dives into different types of technology. The first one's going to be Tim Titus and I are going to be talking about VoIP troubleshooting, but we're going to stretch it out over a couple of episodes so that you can take it in bite-sized segments. So we'll give you your detail, but we're not going to lengthen Twyat. So let's see how it works. Love to hear from you. We've already had some people saying, no, don't make Twyat longer. No. Fine. I heard you. After school specials. You don't have to watch it if you don't want to. You can always download it in little bite-sized chunks for your short commutes.
I'm actually looking forward to that. So hopefully that will come out soon. Of course, we want to thank our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, where can the folks find you and all of your fancy work?
Well, Lou, as always, people can find my writing at darkreading.com. I'll point to that at on Twitter at KG4GWA and frequently on Instagram at Curt Franklin. This next week, I'm going to be going to a conference on the IoT and AI over on the other end of Orlando. Looking forward to that. Lots to report on and getting ready for Interop. So if anyone has any thoughts, any questions, please feel free to hit me up on Twitter or send an email to Twyat at twit.tv, and I'll be happy to answer.
Thanks, Curt. Well, folks, also thanks to you. You are the loyal listener. You're the person who drops in each and every week to drop and to watch and listen to our show and get your enterprise goodness for the week. We want to make it easy for you to watch and listen and catch up on that IT news. Go to our show page right now, twit.tv/Twyat. There you'll find all of our amazing back episodes, plus all of the show notes, all of the co-host information, guest information, and the links to the shows, the stories that we do during the show. But more importantly, next to those videos, you get those helpful download and subscribe links. You support your show by getting audio version, video version, HD video version, listen on any one of your devices. It's really the best way to stay on top of your IT and enterprise news. So go ahead and subscribe, listen, and share with your friends and family, because we really love doing this show, and with your support, we can keep doing it. Now, after you subscribe, also remember, we do the show live each and every week, 1:30 p.m. Pacific at live.twit.tv. Come and watch what's going on behind the scenes, how we set it up, how we get it going, how we make mistakes. We love doing that. So come and watch that live at live.twit.tv. Now, if you're going to watch the show live, you might as well jump into the chat room live as well. irc.twit.tv. There's some great characters in there. We get some great content and questions. So go jump in there and join the show. Now, also, don't forget you can follow me at twitter.com/LouMM. You get to see all the things I do during my week here at Microsoft, as well as you can check out dev.office.com to check out how you can go and extend and make Office more productive for you and your organization. I also want to thank everyone who makes the show possible. Thank you to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support us each and every week doing This Week in Enterprise Tech, and we couldn't do it without them. We also want to thank everyone at Twit, especially the engineers who really do a great job and making everything work smoothly. Of course, we have to thank our loyal producer, Mr. Brian Chee. He keeps the show working really smoothly. He gets all the bookings and the guests and the plans for the shows. So really, without him, we really couldn't do the show. So thanks again, Cheebert. Again, before we sign out, we have to thank our TD for today, Victor. Victor, it's great seeing you. Tradition for today, buddy. What was today's main topic of the show?
Well, the first thing I learned was it's pretty cool in here when it's dark like this. But today I learned that words matter, so you got to put a seal on it.
Nice.
Very nice, very nice, very nice. You're like super close, super close. I think the main focus was don't trust your data, but maybe you will get it next time, Victor.
Next time.
Next time. And until next time, I'm Lou MARESCA, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep quiet.